and remembering to use the hashtag BSFF16, and of course, by any means necessary. See, that was good. Boom. I got the action on that. Okay, so Dr. Blay, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Are these all on? Good morning.
Should all be on.
Good morning. It's just us, so we might as well think of this as a master class for real, right? We're about to learn some things. My name is Yaba Blay, and I am on the advisory board for Blackstar Film Festival, and I've been here since the beginning. I like to take credit for naming the festival Blackstar, because I'm from Ghana, and we do all Blackstar everything. But then when you start talking about the black world and diaspora and culture, Blackstar is a very powerful motif, I think, for us. So I'm excited to be here to kind of set the stage a little bit for our conversation, so you to get an understanding of what I'm hoping we can accomplish. 4 years ago, I won't say today, but 4 years ago, 2012, at our very first Blackstar Film Festival, one of our first conversations was with Ava DuVernay. You guys know who Ava is? Yes? We love Ava. And what's interesting, as the first conversation in our first festival, I remember very clearly Ava sitting and talking about how it's not about knocking on closed doors or knocking on doors where they won't open the door for you. It's about building your own house and having your own door, right? That film festival is when we all saw Middle of Nowhere for the first time. Y'all saw that film? Yes. The film that also then Ava is awarded Sundance Award, being one of the first African-American woman to win Best Director. And now this week in the news, we see that Ava has now been given a $100 million budget for A Wrinkle in Time, making her the first African-American woman, right, to have a budget of that size. So I'm feeling a little proud, right? Because she's ours, and she started here. And not that she started here, let me not say that. We started with her here. We love Ava. But just to say energetically, right, that's what excites me about Blackstar, is that it is a family environment, but then we also walk away, we all walk away with tidbits of information, right? We walk away feeling inspired. Ava inspired me to start my own publishing imprint, because I'm like, I'm gonna build my own door. Ava's inspired a lot of people, but not just Ava, Blackstar. So I'm hoping that this panel does the same thing, yeah? So we're gonna be inspiring this morning? Okay. So what's interesting about this panel on independent film and producing independent film is that in terms of configuration, we have Matthew Kane Smith with us, and he is the connecting point in this conversation. All of our filmmakers here have all worked with Matthew, and all of our filmmakers here also, all of their films have played with Blackstar in some capacity, right? So Neil Drumming, big words, I saw it for the first time here in this theater. Heidi Saman with Namor, which is going to be showing tomorrow at 2:50, and then Matthew Cherry with Night Ride, which is also, you're closing out the festival, yeah?
That's correct.
7 o'clock tomorrow night.
That's a big deal. We're excited. So we're going to be in conversation about producing, right? What it means to produce, and then how do you produce an independent film? So I want to start by having all of the filmmakers introduce yourselves, and not in the kind of like bio way, but more so like, what type of storyteller are you? What types of stories are you wanting to produce? Y'all have mics. Yeah, any of you can start.
I definitely feel caught off guard by that question. I don't know. I think I'm kind of the most interested in. I'm Neil, by the way. I'm probably the most interested in stories that feel real in some way or the other, and that doesn't necessarily mean like that they're not fantastic in some way, but just that they feel like they have real people in it. And I think real people that I actually would know, or personalities or experiences that feel familiar to me. In that way, they're very, like, the idea of making movies is incredibly personal, because I'm just trying to like live out or like give examples of something that feels familiar to me. So that would be my.
I'm Heidi Saman, and I feel similarly to Neil. I think, I'm Arab American, so a lot of the work that I write, or not a lot of the work, but what I've written so far has been rooted in like my family's background and our culture, and it's also intimate storytelling. I'm more interested in like genreless storytelling, like how can we incorporate comedy and drama and make it feel like one cohesive piece, and sort of try to deconstruct those ideas of genre. So I think, yeah, intimate kind of personal storytelling.
Yeah, I think the intimacy is a big thing that I like, but I'm kind of inspired by all kinds of films and storytellers in general. And I mean, I came up really loving the films of the 70s. There was American films that they kind of broke the mold and challenged the studio system, and it kind of changed Hollywood in a way. And I think there's a lot of that going on right now, and it's kind of fun to be part of it.
Hey guys, I'm Matthew. I'm just kind of interested in stories that humanize Black people, people of color. I think that's kind of one of the biggest issues that we face today, even, with this kind of police situation. I feel like a lot of people don't even, I think there's a lack of empathy because in some cases we're not viewed as fully human in that same way. And I think film being one of the more powerful mediums, I think, that's kind of like a main weapon that can be used to kind of show us loving and living life and just kind of fully kind of realized and, fully complex. So I'm kind of interested in stories like that and things that just pull back curtains on things that people kind of look at on a macro level, but haven't thought about kind of on a more micro level.
So we're going to also, in our conversation, we're going to get to what we're calling best practices for producing, independent producing. So hopefully we'll be able to write some notes and walk away with stuff. But I want to backtrack a little bit before we move forward. When we talk about producing, right, you have this idea for a film, you need a producer. I've always wondered things like, well, how do you find the producer, right? Were you always working with them? Is there a listserv? Mm-hmm. Do you work with agents? Like, how do you connect with a producer? So the question is, how did you connect with Matthew?
Matt, this is Ben Queen, right?
Ben.
Yeah, okay. So I went to USC Film School, and my class was particularly, I was in the filmic writing program, which is like undergraduate screenwriting, and most of us went on to do nothing. But there was one guy who you might have heard of named Ben Queen, who is like a big-time television producer. And one year we were going, he made a couple films back then. This is like 2000 and, what do you remember, like?
I mean, it's been a while now, man.
Yeah, well, we went to school together.
It's got to be like 2004, 2003.
Yeah, so like I was going to Sundance, and Matt and Ben told me, oh, you should meet, I'm not going, but you should meet this guy, Matt. He used to buy weed from your roommate. And so we met at Sundance, and I think we just went to like parties and stuff, and
we met at the Alpha Dog party.
Yeah, exactly, for that movie Alpha Dog with Justin Timberlake, which I'm like the only person that liked that movie, but I love that movie.
And we met Anton Yelkin,
yes,
R.I.P.
that's right. I forgot.
We got to spend time with him.
So the thing that I think to me that made Matt my producer in my mind is that he read everything I wrote. Like I was trying to write screenplays. I was working at Entertainment Weekly at the time, and I was trying to write screenplays, and Matt read everything I wrote, and he was very, very supportive, but it wasn't until I think the third thing that he was like, I actually want to make this with you. So it was like, it wasn't like he's just like, I just want to make anything. It's like, I like the way you write, but it's not going to be until I see something that I think we can do. And it was, I forget, it was a Scan?
Scan the Man?
Yeah, that was the first thing we tried to make, but he showed judgment and so that, like, I trusted him because it wasn't just to make a movie, it was to make that movie. So we met through like friends, which is a good way to meet somebody, I think.
Nice. Heidi, yeah.
I don't have that story.
No.
Yeah. No, so I had written my script for Namor and had a very hard time finding a producer. And speaking of Ava DuVernay, this was a while ago, but I reached out to her and said, I'm looking for a producer. And many people know, like maybe, we reach out to the people we think who might have some answers for us. And she gave 2 names. Matt was one of them. And we spoke on the phone. And you kind of turned me down. But
I did.
Yeah. And you just kept calling, though.
Yeah.
You kind of kept calling me, and I'm like, this dude turned me down. Why is he, like, checking in, And, cut to us producing Namor. Like, it just, I think I wedged my way in or something, you know?
Yeah, it took she was in Philly. I didn't really know her. She wrote a really great script. It was really hard to make. I knew that. But once you start talking to someone and you kind of realize how determined they are, how important the film is to them, you read the script again and you learn more about it. And, and she needed help. And I was kind of scared to get into the film, but I knew I could help. And so I wrote her a budget, I wrote her a schedule. And I think I was in Paris on vacation with my family. And I was just like, I had read a script in Neil's too. I got really excited. And I was like, let's do it. We're doing it. We set a start date, and then we did it.
Yeah, similar to Heidi, my connecting thread was also Ava. Consider her a good friend, and my original producer on my first film last fall, she was working with Sally Richardson on some stuff, and so she was unavailable. Then I asked Ava if she suggested anybody. Similar to Heidi, suggested a few people, went out to them. Matt responded. And our situation was a little interesting too, because I didn't send him necessarily a full script. Our movie was mostly improv, so we had like a 20-page outline, not a script. So I think I knew that was going to kind of, could potentially throw some people off, because I really wanted to kind of do it in a way that was a little, unique. And he didn't back away from the challenge, and it was really came together very fast, probably in the course of a month or so.
Yeah, I got an email from Matthew, the same way from Heidi, and I know Ava because she distributed Big Words. We premiered that film at Slam Dance, and then we went to Brooklyn and played at BAM, and we had the sold-out screening. There were like 40 people standing up in the audience, and I think they made an offer to us like 3 days later. They had spies in the audience. But through working with her on that, I've been lucky that she's recommended me to people. But when Matthew Cherry emailed me, he's like introducing himself. I'm like, I know who this guy is, because I've been following you on Facebook and watching and Twitter and just watching. Matthew's really out there, so I knew what he was doing, and so it was kind of exciting to get that email.
So I want to ask you then, Matthew.
Which one?
Oh, I'm sorry. We need nicknames. Do you have another? No?
I'll be Matt.
You'll be Matt. Okay. So you're Matt.
Or just Cherry.
Or Cherry. Okay, good. Thanks. So how, for lack of better terminology, I would call these stories of color, right? With filmmakers of color. How is it then that you, the white guy, gets interested in quote unquote stories of color? Or, I guess, is it interest? Is it a commitment? You know what I mean? How?
I mean, I think it was probably by accident. I think making Big Words, kind of maybe gave me a little bit of credibility, so someone like Heidi or Matthew might trust me, or that Ava might trust me enough to recommend me. But once you get into it, you realize that there's a real excitement to it, especially when you make movies that don't have a lot of money, and you're trying to get crew, and you think that no one's. I mean, me and Neil didn't think anybody's going to show up on the first day of Big Words. I mean, they said they were going to show up, but we hadn't done it before, and so I was terrified. But they did, and you realize how much it meant to them, and even to this day, a lot of the crew. When you produce a film or direct a film, maybe you make one every couple years, but your crew goes off and makes. You look at their credits; they made 5 movies this year. And I called them, and I know that they're working on bigger films and they're making more money, but they come back a lot of times and they're like, that was the best experience I had. I hear about it, Big Words and more. We had a pretty small crew on 9 rides, so, but they're all very dedicated, and there's an excitement to it. I feel somewhat dedicated to it. I have people of color in my family. My wife's Filipino, my kids are Filipino, but I don't know. It really never mattered that much. With Neil, when I started with Neil, it was just the writing. I love writing, and I love directors, and at first it was I just loved the script, man, and I don't know. I don't know. I like to continue to do it, and I think it's a great space to be in. I think it's the most exciting space in American independent film right now, by far. Like, there's still some silly white boy films I want to make, but you know, in a way, these feel a lot more important. So,
I have to
meaningful.
say, Matt is cut out for it too, because I think he doesn't maybe own up to how much he loves the challenge. Like, Matt would call me and be like, I don't understand why we can't get this movie made. It's just as good as, and he would compare it to some film with white people. He would be really frustrated, and he would like want it to work. And so I think he's kind of cut out for like something that, for like the uphill battle. He's built for that.
I mean, I think once you get working with people, their struggle becomes your struggle. And I mean, just in terms of making the films, you realize that the effort it takes, and you know, these guys don't stop, so they make things happen. And I don't know, it's an exciting place to be working in, for sure.
I also
and I hope to continue.
Well, sorry to interrupt. I just think you're also the type of producer who, like, you don't. I think you kind of, you're producing the script, but you're also like still an engaged audience member, and I think like you still are, you know, when you get into the nitty-gritty part of making a film, like you can start to lose the curiosity for it, and I never felt like you lost the curiosity for it. I felt like you stayed with it, and you may not have understood everything that was in the script, but you stayed with it, and I think that's the type of producer that makes these types of movies. It's like you don't have to understand every part of it, and you stay curious about the script, and it still keeps unfolding for you. And I think that's what keeps you engaged. And I think it's never just about a production schedule for you. It can't just be about those things, you know.
Can I ask, you know, listening to these conversations over the last couple of days, I'm still intersected with this creativity connection that we have, but the process between experimental and conceptual. And it seems as though what you just said, Heidi, is more the experimental part of the creative process, where you're not necessarily knowing where it's going, but that you know that you're in it, versus the conceptual thing where I got it, I lay it out, boom, this is it, and this is the movie, and you walk away. So just from that standpoint, from your collective producing experience, the yes, no, you know, it's like you could be motivated high, and then it's like the no, but you know, and when they're saying yes, it's no, but how you're experimentally keeping engaged with the project at the same time conceptually visioning something, you know?
I mean, the thing about the films that Neil and Matthew and Heidi make is that, I mean, they're the reasons I want to make the films, you know? They're really exciting, they're really motivated, they're really inspiring, and, I mean, you kind of just, I still learn about the movies now, you know? I mean, no more when I see it, I see things and I don't know, I learn about it. And you never, as a producer, you know, you're not on set telling anyone what to do. You're watching. I mean, Matthew was directing the movie from a car, and we were in the follow car, you know, and so
I was in the trunk.
he was in the trunk with the sound man the whole time, and yeah, for 12-hour days. So it's, you know, creatively you're really trusting in someone, and you believe in them and their vision, and you hope to do everything you can to help them. But it's exciting to see what happens, you know. And of course, we all get to work with actors, and they're amazing, and they always do things you don't expect that surprise and delight you, you know. Especially when you get great cast, which all of them have been able to do. I think that's one of the big things about working with them is always kind of, you believe in their talent, and you kind of know they're going to get really good cast, and all three films have had leading men that have been terrific. Two of them are the same. Dorian Mystic stars in 9 Rides and Big Words. And working with Dorian is kind of like, it's like working with the director. Like, he's driven, you know. I mean, and you know, I asked him one time. We had done Big Words, and he was doing Annie, which is this giant thing, And it was just, I'm like, you guys, you must think we're a bunch of jokers after working on this thing. And he was like, I love it, man. That's what I love, because you get to be intimate. You get to have more contact with the crew and the directors and a feeling of it. And, you know, I think every director really needs to find a lead actor who's as committed as they are. And if you can find that and find someone talented, it's a big deal. I mean, with 9 Rides, Matthew Cherry he called me and he said, I have this 20-page treatment. We're going to shoot it on 2 iPhones. We're going to shoot it in 6 days, which, you know, I start sweating. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, man, and he's like, and it's going to be all improvised. And I'm like, you're crazy, but I'm like, you need an actor, man. He's like, oh yeah, and I got this guy, and his name's Dorian Missick. And I was like, I'm in, you know. I mean, I would be in anyway, but then I was like, you're speaking my language.
Yeah, Dorian is the major key alert.
Oh, there he is.
That's what's up.
Thanks, Dorian.
Come on down. He's like, no.
Dorian, come on down.
So here's the thing about a guy like Dorian, you know, I mean, he doesn't have to do these little films. And he has all these great opportunities. He's on shows. We've been watching him in movies. I mean, when Neil he first wrote Big Words, he wanted to find somebody that was perfect for the world, that you would believe was a genius rapper in the past. And he's like, I like this guy Dorian Missick. And I was like, well, how do we find him? And I don't know how you found him.
Dorian, you could correct me on this story, right? But didn't I? Okay, so I hit you on Facebook, and you always tell me never to say that because that's not the way you want to be contacted. but we also have one friend in common. My friend who's a DJ, Kaleem, and so I think maybe he helped vouch for me or something like that. But you actually read the script.
Yeah, he reached out to me on Facebook. Please don't do that. It really what happened was because I remember Neil's name. I'm kind of like a writer nerd. Like I follow like music writers, or just if somebody writes an article that I dig, if I read anything else by them, I'm always remembering who they are. So his name rang a bell to me for some reason, and I was like, well, this guy's a legitimate writer. And then I read the script and was like, this is really good. But it's like, it's on Facebook though. It's kind of weird. And then I had just moved to LA like maybe a week or 2 before, and he was like, look, I'm gonna be in LA, come meet with me. And yeah, hit your boy Kaleem, who's also my boy, I guess he was your roommate.
Yeah, we were good friends in college.
Yeah,
Weren't you in a rap group? Didn't you guys have a group together?
He was our DJ sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so because I knew Kaleem as a DJ and I really respected him, and I showed up at the meeting to meet with Neil downtown LA, and Kaleem was there. Yeah. Then I was like, all right, cool. If you're cool with Kaleem, then at least I know you're not like crazy. Yeah. And then we ended up kicking it like the whole night.
Yeah, we like hung out the whole night.
Yeah, we
After Matt went home,
we like bar hopped all night, and I was like, yeah, if I could bar hop with a dude, I know we could do an independent film together.
Yeah, we rolled into the meeting, you know, me and Neil, and we bring Kaleem along. I don't know why that happened, but we decided to bring him along. And
he was DJing at the bar that we went to.
Yeah, and he always drove me around when I was in LA.
Yeah. But we walked in and we see Dorian, who we hadn't met, but Kaleem knew him, and they went up right away. And I don't know, you meet Dorian and you hear him talk for about 5 minutes about hip hop, and we were like, oh yeah, this is great.
It was my story.
It really was.
Maori knows it well. She did the first promo photos for my rap group.
Yes. Yes.
That we used in Big Words. Yeah. That promo photo, Maori took that picture, I think.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't credit her for that. So.
Yeah, we should have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too late to get anything.
Yeah. So I want to back up and talk a little bit about process then, because I've heard the filmmaker say there was a script, and Dorian talks about reading a script and you giving a script. Back up? What do you do? So why are people looking for you, right? And so as a filmmaker, and it's interesting because when I talked to Matthew before, he identified all of you as producers as well, right?
They are all producers, and they all produce their own films. I mean, you know, definitely. I mean,
so what does that
Neil
mean?
probably doesn't admit it, but you know, we did it all together. Everything we do, we decided together. Heidi was making her movie before I came along. She did a Kickstarter campaign. She got her leading man. She started raising money. I think she didn't quite know where to go from there. But there's no doubt. And, Matthew Cherry, he produces everything. Everything that happens on the film is because of him. I really help out in a way more.
Why are you laughing now?
He's just modest, but we'll
We'll
get into it.
So we'll let him tell his side.
I know how to
And
do
then
a
we'll
lot
come
of
back.
technical things. So, I can break down the script. I can schedule it. Think a lot about what crew we have to get. And, I feel I'm pretty good at trying to find a crew. Some films, a lot of times the directors have a crew. Heidi had an incredible DP she'd worked with. Me and Neil kind of put the whole thing together. I don't know how we did that. And Matthew worked with his DP, Richard Ville, who's incredibly talented. And so each one's different. And so it's hard to say, as a producer, I think you try to fill all the vacuums that are there. Sometimes you don't have a big team, sometimes you do. And sometimes there's a lot of other producers who are helpful. On Nine Rides, Jerome Caldwell, Monica Young, they do a lot, and I'm just a part of the team, really. And everyone kind of has their specialties. And I don't know that I have a specialty other than really just trying to make sure that, all the aspects of things get taken care of. Because there's a lot of different things you got to kind of pay attention to, right down to the catering, which is the quickest way you can lose your crew if you screw that up. And I've done that. And not just that the food would be bad, but the food could be good, but it doesn't arrive on time, and you lose. And it takes an hour and a half for lunch to a half hour, and you lose time. And each movie we try to do that better. And I don't know. As a producer, you really have to. I think you can kind of sit back and let things happen, but you can also be very proactive, and just ask a lot of questions. And sometimes you ask questions and they have an answer, and sometimes they don't, and then you try to figure it out. So a lot of it's just really putting in the work, and I don't know.
So it's a filmmaker then. So you have a bright idea. You want to make a film. You're hype. You're going to make a film. You need a producer. Why? What do you need a producer to do?
Well, filmmaking is like the ultimate team sport. It's so collaborative. I think you could really get in trouble just thinking it's like a dictatorship or like a one-man band kind of situation. Like, you all work for me, because sometimes, you don't have it all figured out. You think you may have a good idea or how to bring to life, but you need help to collaborate. Some people are better with numbers. Some people are better creatively. Some people are better, you got to kind of know your strengths. And that's why I encourage filmmakers to do short films and music videos and web content before you even attempt to do a feature film, because, I'll say this, I played 3 years of professional football in the NFL, and filmmaking was literally the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It was no comparison, because you go from being like a piece of a puzzle, being on a crew, being a PA or something, to it's your team now. You're the coach, you're the, the owner or whatever, and now literally every decision is on you. Why is her shirt red? Why was the car this particular color? You know what I mean? Every single decision falls on the filmmaker, and you need collaborators, strong collaborators, particularly producers, who can range from a variety of doing a budget. You got people that are more physical, more crew-like, that handle budgets and getting crew. You also have more producers that are more creative. Some producers, they have relationships with talent, and they'll help, lock down some talent. Some may have more relationships with distributors. Some may have money, so there's really just a lot of different ways that producers kind of come into play, but they're essential to getting the project done, because, unlike a lot of professions, you can't do it yourself.
That's me. I was a producer on Namor, but there's a lot of things I can't do, and as Matt says, it's a big effort, and you can't. At some point, once you direct, you kind of can't be producing, because you're in the headspace of directing. And I felt like there were days where I just didn't even see Matt, but I knew he was making it all work. And And you need like that quiet, efficient engine pushing everything along. And that's really what you were, because I'm in it with the actors. I'm making decisions with the production designer, deciding on like costume stuff, and I can help so far. I know why I wanted to make No More, but like I'm not good with like the budgeting stuff. I'm not good with like delineating the days. Like Matt sort of sees a script and he just knows the stuff that I don't know. And he also knows like the things that maybe I need to work on. And so I felt like, yeah, you need someone else to kind of come in and give you that like engine, like the quiet turbine that sort of lets you keep going. And also just, we also hear of this typical relationship of the producer and the director at odds in these Hollywood movies. And I remember one day, like we'd shot a scene of No More, and I didn't feel good about it. I felt like what I had written was not strong enough. I felt like the performances were not strong enough. And the last thing a producer wants to hear is you go up to them and be like, I want to reshoot that scene. That is like disastrous. But I went up to Matt and I said, I don't like that scene. It did not work, and I want to rewrite it. And Matt just nodded and was like, okay, how are we going to do it? And I thought, like, that's like the team quiet turbine person who's like making sure it can happen. That means we're going to revise the entire schedule. It means we have to like tell certain actors who are going to come that certain day to come at different times. I mean, it will delay a whole set of decisions. And that's why you need a producer, is to sort of to make sure that like the creative vision can happen. And you trusted me with that. You knew that would be the right thing to do.
So let's talk a little bit then about film in the independent context. Like, what does that mean, and how does that impact this dynamic? So, well, I guess the first question is like, what motivated you or inspired you or even affirmed you and put the battery in your back to say, I can do this independently?
We had to. We tried not to. I mean, when Neil wrote Big Words, we wanted to make it for, I don't know, $1 million. It was like, who do we want to get?
So absurd amount of money for a movie with 3 black male leads.
And then, at the time, and I was coming out of working as an executive at a film company, and I was still in that mindset where that's what you needed, and we talk about cast, and it was like, who we want to get, and he's like, I want Dorian Missick, and we're like, all right, we want him for the film, and try and get him, and you keep working on it. Me and Neil would argue about the budget, because he would be like, what do we need? Why do we need $500,000? Barry Jenkins made Medicine for Melancholy for $16,000.
Yeah, a couple people screwed me up. But like just telling us like, you hear a whole bunch of things about how things cost.
Yeah, you hear these stories,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, if they did it, if Ava made I Will Follow for $50,000, then what are we doing here? And it took a minute to be like, okay, stop yelling at me, Neil. We'll make it for $50,000, And that's literally how we came up with how we were going to make the film.
Yeah.
And we just made up a number. It wasn't, you send a budget to like a line producer in Hollywood, and they'll give you what it costs to do it. They're gonna give you a fat budget.
Do you remember when we had a different director attached, and they charged us to write the budget?
I paid someone to write a budget. I would never do that.
Yeah, and you never need to do that again.
But it kind of got silly, and you end up doing it out of need to make the film independently. A lot of times you definitely want to get more support, you want to get more help, but when it's not there, there comes a point when you got to kind of sit down and say, how much money can we raise, and kind of fit it in, It's good to have a script that you're able to do that with. With 9 Rides, Matthew had made a film. He'd made a feature film, and so, the concept of the film was to do it independently from the beginning. Which was great. Matthew knew what he told me on the first phone call is what happened with the film, as crazy as it was, and. You totally told me exactly what we were going to do. And seeing it happen didn't feel like it was going that way, because it was improvised, and I didn't know what was going on a lot of times, because, and even Matthew directed the film with his ears, essentially, from the back of a car, listening. and which was really kind of exciting and scary at the same time. But he kind of knew what he was going to do going in. I mean, I don't know. When you conceived of No More, when you first started, did you think you were going to make it for millions of dollars? What did you think was going to happen?
I was really clueless about that aspect of things. I mean, I think one of the first things you said about my script is there are too many people. And I didn't realize like where your brain was going with that, which is like money, 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 money. It's like corralling people and like hiring people. And
it's not just that if you have a big cast, it's not just that, you have to pay the cast. You have to feed the cast. You need more crew to service everything. And so it does make it bigger. I mean, I don't know that you cut many parts from the film. I think we shot with all those actors. Her film was interesting because it was about one guy, and it was very much about this man's journey. And so you could look at it and say, well, you don't need 35 speaking parts, But then you realize that it wasn't just about his journey, it was about his world that he lived in. And to get a chance to really dig into that world, you did need to show all the people that were in the world. And we found a way to make it work. I don't know how we did it. I guess I do know how we did it. We just kept pushing. So.
I mean, one thing I'd like to say about this is like, it's very important as filmmakers to be realistic with yourself. Like, I think that's the biggest problem that I think a lot of filmmakers have. Like, I think there's a fine line between being ambitious and having the big dream and then like not being realistic. And so, I think living in LA and kind of PAing and working my way up, like I feel like, and also do your research, kind of see what the market is like how Matt said about Ava's movie costing $50,000. Like a lot of times, especially at the Q&As, one of the first questions will be, what's your budget? A lot of times they'll look at their producer awkwardly and be like, can I share it? And they'll be like, no. But sometimes if you actually like write them privately or you talk to, you can get real information. And it's kind of like, it's the difference between, do you want to wait years and try to get this budget that may or may not happen, try to raise these millions of dollars or try to work it through a studio system, or do you want to actually get out there and create and make something and make it now? And I think that's the biggest reason why I think independent film comes into play, because like even with Nine Rides, we came into it like, look, it's going to be indie. I'm not even going to try to send this to a studio or something. Like, we want to get it done. We want to make it, the timetable is so tight. We shot like the week of Thanksgiving, and we premiered at South by Southwest the following March. So like, we had to like figure it out really fast. But, I just think it's really important to be realistic with your expectations and, know that your film may not require $1 million budget. So just kind of do your research and figure it out if that's the path, where you can get your film at.
So for you, doing it independently was more about being able to do the work and get it out?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, do you want to sit on the bench and you want to like talk about making a film for years, or do you want to actually make a film? You know what I mean? Like, it's, writers write, directors direct, actors act, producers produce, editors edit. So if you want to say that you want to be a filmmaker, you have to actually make a film and make your movie. And, and don't write these, I mean, it's all about in the writing too. Like, you got to be realistic in terms of your scale. Our movie literally all takes place in a car. It's, it's about an Uber driver. 90% of it takes place in a car. And so that concept in itself, lends itself to not requiring a huge crew. And I knew that we can get it done for less than like, $20,000 or whatever. So that's what we did. But, your movie might be like super huge and you may have to scale it back. So it's just a matter of just kind of like doing the research, having strong producers and people that you can consult with that can help you make those decisions.
Dorian, as an actor, like if somebody, how did you get connected in terms of Nine Words?
How did I get involved with Nine Rides?
Yeah, Nine Rides.
I met Matt. Did we meet on the music on Bilal's video?
Yeah, yep, it was Bilal.
I did a music video with Matt that he directed. I don't know how I ended up in that. Maybe an act. Somebody else told me that you were looking for him. I don't remember. Either way. So we met that way. And from that point on, I started seeing Matt everywhere. Like, at all Ava's screenings and things like this. And this is in the early Ava DuVernay days. And I was like, oh, this dude is like really trying to make movies. You work with video directors, and sometimes those guys are just trying to meet girls. And so I didn't really know for sure what kind of cat Matt was, because we didn't have any creative conversations, So Yeah, so
Combo's going a
that's
different
not a
way.
diss, but like, because he still might be trying to meet girls. Like, I don't want to knock that out the mix. Like, I don't want to keep you from meeting young ladies, but it just felt so. I didn't really know. So once we started kind of bumping into each other in all the right places, then the conversation came up about film. Let's do a film. And then it's funny because I always say, I think I offended you when you were doing The Last Fall, because you sent me the script. And it was a date. And we were in the Bahamas. My wife and I were in the Bahamas looking for a place to get married. And I was like, I'm reading scripts on the beach. I was feeling real Hollywood. And Ava has sent Middle of Nowhere at the same time. But I only knew Ava a little bit. And not thinking, I hit up Matt like, yo, man, can you give me Ava's number? I want to talk to her about the script. And the text came back. He was like, did you read my script? And I was like, oh. And if you notice, I'm not in The Last Fall. But I was like, yo, next time this cat does to do a movie, man, like, I gotta rock with him.
I'm learning stuff too.
That's what's up. Talking about producing, then I think a lot of times when we talk about independent endeavors in general, but definitely when it comes to film and creative work, a lot of folks and content creators, producers, directors talk about the freedom that comes with being able to produce a film independently. What kind of freedoms come as a filmmaker, as a producer?
Freedom to not have enough money to do what you want to do. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, you know, I hear a lot of talk in the past few years about giant Hollywood films and how hard they were to make. And I mean, I like those films and I like Leonardo DiCaprio, but, you know, it wasn't that hard. Give me a break, you know. You guys get big fees and trailers and PAs, and it's not like making an independent film. It's really difficult. And one of the reasons that you go that route is because you get to choose, that you get to choose your actors. I mean, I think that's a really big deal for directors, is to get the kind of cast they want and someone who's going to be authentic to their vision. And a lot of times, producers are terrible. They take that away. They tell you got to have one of these 5 people, you know, and you get in this thing where you can really get set back by that, you know. You go out to a few actors, they never read it, you get passes you don't know. And with these films, you really, I don't know, the choices are yours, you know. And I think that's probably one of the great things about it, you know. No one really told any of these guys what to do. They did what they wanted to do. And I think the movies kind of show that. There's a love and authenticity to them that maybe you don't get otherwise.
Yeah, you get to take advice. You know, I think the best thing about making the film for me was that I got to be really collaborative and also in charge. Like those two things together were sort of awesome because you could ask the opinions of people that you chose, that you respect. You're not given people to work with. You know, we picked everybody. Like Matt was like, you know, we picked a restaurant in Brooklyn where he would have me meet everybody, and I met everybody pretty much, and we made we chose who was going to work on the movie, and that freedom was probably the best thing for me, that you got to actually decide whose vision coincided with yours. And I think it's kind of like, you know, it's like Instagram or Twitter or something. Once you know what the restriction is, which is your very limited budget, within that you get to do whatever you want, you know.
I also think editing time too. You know, for Namor, it took. How long did it take? I feel like it took a while.
I'll just say a while.
It took a while. But I don't know if you're given that amount of time and the kind of notes you get. Like, you really have to go on your own instincts, and you get to go on your own instincts and try different things. And the time to do that, the freedom to do that, you know, to see, like, maybe the scene can be a little longer than I anticipated, like sort of testing the tone of things. You know, there are no focus groups in this. There's no, you know, you don't have to meet a certain demographic with any of it. That is freedom.
And you don't have a bank loan that is going to come in and people take your movie away from you. I mean, there's a long list of movie directors, some of the greatest ones we've ever had, that have had movies taken away from them or had a bond company step in. And, you know, when you make bigger films, you definitely have to deal with that. You're not going to be able to edit the movie for 9 months. They're going to need it in 5 months or 4 months because they need to get their return on their dollar. And if you have investors on a small film that are willing to roll with you, it definitely gives you the freedom. It also gives you the freedom to choose which distributor you're going to go to, which is a big deal. I mean, when we made Big Words, we had offers from other places. You know, people that would put it out, give us a little money. But then we had a firm, Array, and they really believed in the film. And they weren't just going to dump it in the theater and stick it on DVD in Walmart and never see it again. They were going to push it. They were going to tell people about it. They were going to get their volunteers and their rebels to talk about it and make videos about it and really become part of the conversation, which I think if we were in a different position and we had investors who were like, you know, take 10 grand here instead of something else, we might not have been able to make those choices. And I think that really, we were very lucky for that. Yeah, and you know, a lot of times the producer can be the bad guy because he's the guy saying we're taking this deal or that deal. And on these films, I'm not even in that position to tell anybody what to do. I give advice. I mean, I'll push or say this or that. But in the end, they get to decide the fate of their film. And in many ways, they own their film. And they'll be able to own it forever. You know, eventually those distribution contracts run out. They have a term. And if you don't own the film, you know, the producer can sell it wherever they want. But in these cases, these films are going to last forever, and the directors are going to have a chance to always determine what's going to happen with that film. And that's one of the great things about independent film that you won't get when you do have a lot more money, you know.
Okay. So let's get into the best practices part of the conversation. But before we do, well, let's add to it, because I understand in production that there are phases, right? So in talking about these best practices, do's and don'ts for people who are interested in producing, let's talk about it in the phases. So let's talk about it in terms of the phase of do's and don'ts, tips and thoughts for pre-production, production, post-production. Can we do it that way? Okay, so best practices, what would you share with folks interested in independent filmmaking, producing? Pre-production.
Pre-production. I think it's important to have a vision for your film, you know, to have an end goal, to be realistic in terms of, because particularly when it comes to casting, and we'll talk about pre-production, a lot of times you can go two different ways. You're at a fork in the road. I can either hire incredibly talented actors who may not be considered quote unquote known, but, you know, I rock with them, I know they're dope. But that may hurt you potentially long run on the distribution side of things, because a lot of times distribution companies, hell, they don't even know who anybody outside of Queen Latifah, Will Smith, Morgan Freeman are, you know what I'm saying, half the time, let alone, you know, you're really dope homie. And so you got to kind of make a decision like, okay, does this amount of budget plus this cast that might be dope but may not be like super well known, will that be able to get me my return on my investment? I think if you think about things in terms of that, because at the end of the day, it is a business, you know. If not, it'd be an art project that you could just play for your friends when they come over to your house. But if you're in the business of trying to do this to get distribution and to try to, you know, get a career out of it, you know, you have to think like a business person too. And so I think one of the first things you have to do is just think long term in terms of how do the pieces that I have, how will that line up in terms of making me get a return on my investment? Now, there's no right or wrong answer. Tahir Jeter, or Jeter, however you say his last name, I'm sorry. I consider him a good friend, and we had a couple conversations about his film, and I was like, look, you know, I love what you're doing, but just be conscious, you know, it may be a little harder for you to lock down the type of distribution that I know that you're talking about trying to get with the particular type of cast you have, but you know, so there's no right or wrong way to do it, because he premiered at Sundance, got his distribution, and he's chilling like a villain right now. But those are things that you have to kind of be aware of, and I think you need to think about kind of in the pre-production phase of your film. How do you want to, what festivals do you want to kind of premiere at? You know, just all those things I think are considerations that you have to have going into it so that you're not trying to figure it out on the way.
What y'all got?
I mean, I think the most important important original decisions in pre-production are obviously who the director is, and the script. You know, I think a lot of times films, you get in the editing room. I hear this from my editor friends, and they're like, you know, almost exclusively the problems in the edit were script problems that weren't figured out in pre-production. And I think definitely, you know, try to be unmerciful in trying to figure out what those are in pre-production. And casting is a big deal, you know. I don't think, I don't think directors can make an okay actor great. I think they can put a great actor in a position to be great. And so you really have to cast actors that are dope. I think that's like the biggest thing and the most exciting thing. And the other thing is budgeting. You know, loss and damage is a column in your budgets. You better put some money in, because things always go wrong. And you know, when things go wrong and you don't have money to cover those things, even if you don't have a lot of money, you know, you're going to go to a location, somebody's going to scratch a floor, something's going to happen, and you're going to need some money to do that. And I think thinking that through in advance and trying to kind of think through what could go wrong, you know, and try to do as much as you can to be prepared for problems and think them through in pre-production is really helpful.
I think knowing how to package your film is important. It's something that feels very antithetical to the creative process, because you're like, I'm writing a script and I want it to be accessible to everybody, and I want so many people to watch this. But packaging your film, and I did this through the Kickstarter that I did, 3 years ago, it helped me a lot. It helps you talk about your film to other people. It helps you talk about your film to like potential crew members, to cast. It helped me talk about my film to you. It gives you a language to communicate with other people who are not attached to the script yet. And it doesn't feel right when you do it. Like, I really didn't want to do a Kickstarter. It went against everything in my gut to do it. Like, I just thought, oh my God, I'm begging. This is horrible. I have to be in front of a camera. This is so embarrassing. But I have to say, it's the first thing people watch when they're curious about who you are and if they want to become a part of the film. It really helps. And it doesn't have to be a Kickstarter, but what it does in preparing for the Kickstarter, I had to find the language for the film. I had to know what my film was about, and I had to know how to talk about it. So there's that.
Yeah, best practices. I know that's scary. I don't know. I guess for me, it just felt like casting and crewing up. Casting, I was a big part of that, and I felt like I did the best I could under the circumstances, having done it for the first time. I think with crew, you kind of wanted, it was nice to have a mat. That would be my best advice, is to have somebody who can help lay out what you're supposed to do, and so we ended up delegating to the right people. I think I think pre-production wise, that's the smartest thing you can do, is have a production designer that you love and that thinks on their own and works on their. I remember when we met with Sarah
White,
Sarah
who's
White,
the production designer of Big Words.
Yeah, and also most recently is 5 Nights in Maine, right? I think.
Yeah, she did 5 Nights in Maine.
Yeah, she's done a bunch of stuff. But when I met with her the first time at breakfast or whatever, she had sketches. She had sketches of what Yaya's apartment would look like or something like that. And then the same thing when I met Eniola, our costume designer.
Eniola Dawadi.
Yeah, she had
terrific costumes.
She had ideas already from reading the script. She wasn't waiting for me to tell her what to do. So I think the notion of just delegating to people who are smarter than you in the field that you're asking them to fill, that seems to me is the best thing you can do pre-production wise.
Yeah, getting your crew in pre-production is a big deal. Fellow travelers, people that believe in you. Big Words was really hard because I lived in LA and Neil lived in Brooklyn, and Neil had been writing screenplays for years, but he hadn't been deep in production, so we didn't have a lot of local connections. And when I'd come up, I'd worked for this director, and he would always send me off to try to. this guy named Bob Rafelson who made films in the 70s, like 5 Easy Pieces. He produced Easy Rider and did all these films. And when I was working for him in my 20s, whenever he wanted to get a DP, he would make me go find out what Marty Scorsese, who'd he use, or, you know, who's that Cap Bryant singer, who shot Usual Suspects, let's talk to him. And he'd make us go look at those other films, and you steal from them. You don't just steal ideas, you steal their crew. And when we made Big Words, you know, it was like, Brooklyn was started to pop with like indie films, and so I didn't know how to find these people, but I knew that Pariah just got made there. I knew Restless City got made there. So I got Restless City's casting director, cold called her. I had a dope script, so I could talk it up, and she read it.
That's where Lois is from.
That's how I got her. And then Sarah White, you know, I was like, Pariah, that was dope. I don't know if we can get their production designer, but I bet their art director's pretty slick. And I bet she wants to be a production designer. And I think it was the first film she was a production designer on.
Yeah, didn't we promote everybody?
We promoted pretty much everybody.
We promoted everybody.
And so our costume, you know, and we were trying to get someone to do costume, and Eniola Dewadu had worked, I think, as assistant costume designer on Mother of George. And there were all these films, and, you know, you can go after the crew and get people. They're still young, they're still hungry. But they want to take that next step up, and I think that's a really big deal. Finding fellow travelers, people that they're still experienced, but they were very much like us. I mean, with Sarah White, our production designer, me and Neil thought we were pretty ambitious, but she killed it.
Yeah,
it was she went above and beyond. And same, our production designer on Namor, I think I gave them both the same budget, which was like $1,000 to make an 18-day feature film. Yeah, it's for real. And they didn't quit. They took the job.
Matt is a really nice guy, and like people like talking to him, and sometimes they concede to things they shouldn't.
Yeah. So we put a lot of pressure on them, not just to do their job, but to do extraordinary things. And you know, I think when we were doing Big Words, Neil thought we would just shoot in all his friends' apartments with the white walls, and I'm like, we ain't shooting with white walls. And it's like, so we painted them. Yeah. Sarah would go into someone's beautiful brownstone and say, this is nice, but I'm going to redesign your whole joint and paint all the walls.
This is how I knew I was making a movie. When I really knew we were actually making a real film, I got an email one day. I was sitting in my apartment. I got an email with the person who I'd never met who had been tasked with making the fake weed. Yeah. Like, it was just shots of a person like making weed with glue and honey and like oregano and like trying different ways of making weed. And I was like, who is this person? And I was told that they work for me.
Yeah. But when you get really ambitious crew members, that they want it as bad as you do, you know? And I mean, it elevates everything you do. And finding those people is it can be hard. It takes a while. I mean, I think I interviewed 15 script supervisors on Namor before we got somebody who'd work for the terrible rate we were offering. But, you know, she was ambitious. And once they kind of get in, you know, you're lucky to work with directors that people are inspired to work with, and they want to be part of that thing. So as hard as it is, I mean, yeah, it's always been the hardest thing for me is offering really smart people not great rates. But I've learned it is what it is, you know, and if you can't get them, there'll be somebody else. There's talent out there. There's so much talent, you know, especially in African-American films. I mean, the amount of acting talent that's out there that should have a lead role, I mean, it's deep.
Let me ask you this, though, because I think for a lot of people, when we think about like independent productions, and we do know that the budgets are really small, but at the same time, I'm hearing y'all say you got to make sure it's dope, right? So like, how do you approach somebody like, I don't have any money, but I need you to do, like, my question always is like, what might be the reason for that person to accept your offer?
That's the first question I have. I always say, you know, I bet you'd be great for this, but why in the hell would you do this? Because I know we can't pay you that much. And if their answer is like, then it's like we move on to the next person, you know. When you meet someone, I mean, the right answer is, I got to do this movie, you know. And you got to find people, whether it's your production designer, your DP, or PAs or interns that become important parts of your production. I mean, we had 3 people on 9 rides that
That was our crew.
our crew. They were our crew, and they were all incredibly talented, and they all needed opportunity. And they started as basically PAs, but they end up being your first AC, your second AC, your AD, and they're super talented. I think you really have to be good at trying to be good at judging people's motives. I mean, one of the nice things about making a film where no one gets paid that much is nobody comes for the money. So you don't end up getting disgruntled people that often. Because they're there for the love, and I think it shows in the films.
And you also have to just, frankly put, appeal to people's self-interest. Like particular actors. Like, if this is an actor who makes millions of dollars on a TV show, but they've never had a lead role, in a film, then that's your angle right there. Like, dude, I know you get your money over here, but I want to put you in this movie for this little SAG ultra low budget rate, but this is gonna be your first opportunity to be a lead in a movie with crew. Like, okay, I see you DPing on all these commercials, but I think you'd be dope as a feature film DP. So, you know what I mean? Sometimes you just gotta kind of figure out what each individual person's angle is and just try to, work that. That's if you believe in that they can, take that next step up. And also just be loyal. Like if you're gonna do a lot of productions, if you work on music videos and smaller stuff, when you do make that jump up, if these people are capable, like, rock with them. Don't go and try to find a brand new DP and you didn't rock with this dude for all 20 of your music videos, and now you're like, man, let me try to get Bradford Young now, as dope as he is, like, show some loyalty, because a lot of times in this business, what you're gonna find over time is that you're gonna come up with those exact same people that you started with, and, it's just the right thing to do.
One thing when you get crew, too, is a lot of times you're meeting people for the first time, you're trying to decide in an interview if they can handle it, and you really don't know. You got to check their references, man. I mean, I call people all the time, and I'm relentless about calling people. I try to call 3 references for every person on the crew, and you learn an incredible amount of stuff about them, and you'll find that some producer that won't return my phone call if I'm trying to pitch a script, they'll hit me back in a text immediately if I'm like, was that intern any good? And if they're like, hell yeah, hire him, and they text me back in 5 minutes, I mean, that's a big deal, and relationships is everything, and if somebody did good for somebody else and they were loyal and they worked hard, they're probably gonna do the same thing for you. So I think, like Matthew's saying, like, think of people's motivation. Like, why would they want to do this film? And if you can find the right people that are really like you, you're doing the movie, it's an opportunity for you too. The directors, it's an opportunity to do their art. And I think it's that way with all the crew. And you just have to, keep working at it and put a lot of time in finding people. And because once they get going, once you're in production, that production designer's doing their thing, you'll answer questions, you'll help them as much as you can. But they better be good. Same with actors. You're not going to turn an okay actor into a great actor on set. They better be great when they showed up. And casting, it's like 90% of it, I think.
What helps you decide, Dorian? Like, in terms of which independent projects, if people approach you?
Yeah, like, why you keep doing these things, man? I love it. I love it.
No, I do independent film for the same reason why I would do theater. An opportunity to stretch, do something that you love. Once you kind of figure out that you can get into the Hollywood machine and make money, and you realize very quickly, it's particularly with actors of color, like they figure out, if you can do one thing, they want you to do that and stay in that zone. And I get a lot of offers for major Hollywood projects where they will literally pitch it to me like this. Listen, it's not really much of a role, but we want to put you in it because you're so interesting, you'll make it interesting. And you're like, yo, why don't you just write me something interesting? And Neil wrote me something interesting. Matt came with an interesting idea. And so I'll say to the producer who said, well, yo, can you just do this because it's interesting? Yeah, I'll do it. You can pay me, but you're also paying Matt and Neil because, I'm doing a movie, which you tell a producer on a television show, they love that. And we're gonna need you to help them fly me back and forth from Canada to do this movie, and they'll do it because I'm making their sorry stuff interesting. So they'll help pay for it, and you figure out ways to do it, you know? And then, you know, you get money and you make your insurance and your wife is happy. And then you can also do a movie that you're proud of and that your agents love. And then they're like, yo, you always pick the greatest independents. How are you able to do that? Well, I read the script. Yeah, I read, yeah, not them, because what they read is the breakdown. Oh, how much money is it? Hey, we got this thing, man. We're going to probably pass. But take a look at it, and you read it, and you're like, this is a dope script, I need to do it. And then they'll send you something that's like $50 million budget, and they're like, we're gonna say yes to this, just read it. And you're like, but he's the black dude who gets killed in the first scene. But they want you to do it. So you just figure it out.
Wow, okay. That's what's up.
You work the system.
No, that's what's up. I appreciate that because I do think relationship building is important in everything that we do.
I mean, in everything in life, I've learned. I mean, I call it politics these days, and not like Republicans and Democrats, but it's building a constituency, you know? And I think I've been learning that. It's one of the things about pre-production that we didn't do on Big Words, which was shout out that we were making a movie. We like kept it a secret, you know, which was not very smart, but we didn't know. And then
why not smart to keep it hush?
Oh, I mean, things have changed. I used to think that you make a movie, you don't show a trailer, you bring it to the film festival, you show it, and you surprise everyone, and then it's like bam, and then you're in. But you know, that story didn't happen that much back then, and today it definitely doesn't seem to happen. And so when we got to Namor, Heidi's Kickstarter, it's not just that you raise money, but that video's out there. People hear about it. You get press. It gets covered by Filmmaker magazine. Or, you know, Matthew Cherry, he's promoting his movie, 9 Rides, like the moment we start making it. And I think that's really the only way with independent film these days, because, you know, there are, like, press will cover you. It's like you want to get into Deadline. Well, they're not going to cover you after the movie's been shot until you get into a film festival, but they'll cover you the day that you start production. So you got to send out a press release, like we did that with Namor. You know, we started production today, and of course we were in Deadline, and we got picked up by Entertainment Weekly, you know, right under the Julia Roberts movie, and it was like but the opportunity would be gone for that, because it's not news anymore if you're not shooting. And so that's one of those things you can do as well. But I definitely think, you know, while you're in production, you're actually pretty hot. People are talking about you, and getting out there with the film then is like your first opportunity to get real press. You know, when you add an actor to the cast, maybe you can get another run in the press. But then it's social media too, and I learned so much. I mean, I thought Neil did okay on social media.
Awful.
Then I met Heidi.
Terrible.
Yeah, he's terrible. And then I met Heidi.
Ava used to yell at me. It was awful.
Yeah. And then Heidi was doing really well. And then I meet this cat. And I mean, I'd be meeting people at film festivals want to see 9 Rides because they heard about it on Twitter and they've been following everything Matthew does. And you know, you learn more every time. But I definitely think the politics of relationships is a big deal, and especially in Hollywood. I mean, I never got any job just like sending in a resume. I guess my first internship is how I got it, but I didn't get the one I wanted. They sent me to some other company, you know. But every other job was because I met somebody and somebody said you did a good job, you know. Especially as a producer, you don't, or especially if you're young and you don't have like a track record. You're not an actor with a reel that shows you're dope, you know. You kind of need someone to vouch for you. But the building a constituency thing is a big deal. I think you have to start building your audience from day one, you know.
Is there like a tipping point for a social media thing? You know, like when you're saying you're bringing a constituency to the party to help the producer empower the pitch and say, listen, I know this is a good thing. Big Words had an audience, you're not right, you're talking about it. So is it a tipping point like you have 10,000 followers or, you know, are you looking for a particular number to know that you can go viral with using that information to get more stuff?
I mean, I'm not at the point where I'm not actually on Twitter because I'm a fool. But I should be on there. But I guarantee you that right now, people in Hollywood are, I mean, I've heard places that finance films, they're like not necessarily looking for somebody who acted in a bunch of movies. They want somebody with a lot of Twitter followers because they see what they think, they know that they can get free marketing out of that, and it's powerful, you know. And it's powerful if you're Kevin Hart, obviously, and the studio wants to pay you $1 million to tweet about the movie that you're in. But it's powerful if you're Matthew Cherry and you know you're building up your followers. I've been seeing, I mean, I'm like reading the British papers and they're quoting his Twitter feed, you know, and that's reach though, and people, they want to see your work. If you're a writer director, building your audience is just a giant thing, you know. So.
I mean, I think, you know, there's two sides of that coin, right? So you have somebody like myself who, you know, is active on social media, Ava DuVernay who goes in. Then you have Ryan Coogler. This dude ain't know anything. You know what I'm saying? And everybody probably knows his name more than anything too. So, like, I don't think there's a particular rule of thumb as it relates to that. You know, I know Dorian, he just recently kind of got up on that thing, you know, before
Are you back on?
And you don't even have his name on there. It's like his DJ name. You know what I mean? So I think, at the end of the day, it's like all about engagement. I mean, my thing is, as a filmmaker, I think it's just like any form of arts. Like, you can't expect other people to go harder for your film than you're expected to go. So for me, I just always was like, well, damn, you know, I can't expect some random distribution company that doesn't even know what my film is to, you know, go hard for it. Why would they go harder for it than I would go? So, I just think everybody's different, you know, with Ryan and other people like that. I think sometimes it comes down to the actual work. You know, sometimes, you know, you got to smoke and mirrors it up a little bit if, you know, the work, you know, isn't as, you know, is solid, but it's maybe not to that level. So I just think everybody has to kind of find their lane, and some people naturally are just engaging online and they can do that, and other people aren't, but the work is dope, so it doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah, and I don't think it's just Twitter. I mean, when I met Heidi and she said I turned her down, you know, I kept reading her blog. She has this blog called Four Eyes, which is about film. And every time she would post something new, I was like, she really likes things that I like. And it was a big part of me really really understanding what she was about. And without that, I wouldn't have known, you know. I mean, we didn't meet in person until 3 weeks before we started production. So we worked together for months and months. And I mean, how do you approach Twitter? You're in the middle of it now. I mean, promoting your films.
Yeah, I'm not on. I'm on Twitter, but I'm not on it all the time. And I started the Tumblr because I felt like there was a community out there that I missed film school, essentially. I kind of missed people who talked about films and thought about movies and like thought about frames. And so I started. I mean, I don't have a huge following, but it was like a nice reminder every day to just say, you know what, like think about film once a day. Think about a cool frame, or think about, you know, something a director said. And I've been amazed, you know, and it's not hugely popular, but I've found people have been drawn to it, you know, for whatever reason. I think I don't always write personally on there, but I think it has given people some insight into how I think about films and movies. And you know, it's sort of subtle. It's not me sort of personally putting my voice out there, but that's worked for me. You know?
It feels like your voice to me, though. The choices that you make and the films you want to talk about, it's cool. And I mean, I saw something that you wrote something, I don't know if it was on social media or an article a month or so ago, and another filmmaker just put a post on Facebook having read it, and they were in the middle of trying to make their first feature, and you know, they were inspired by what she had written in her struggle, you know, and I think a lot of times, for me at least, I like to kind of hide all the struggle and not let anyone know about how we got there. And I think I'm learning that part of it is people are interested in the story of making the film, you know. And I think that can be just as interesting. I mean, not just on an independent level. I mean, I was talking about Leonardo DiCaprio and his film. I mean, that film, the story of making that film was heard by more people than saw the film probably, you know. And so that can be really powerful too. And I think that the more we can do to be out there, the more audience we can build. It's really about building an audience for your films. So.
And to comment on like maybe for production, it's just that, you know, most of you all are making movies in here, but 99% of what we're going through is people telling us no. I mean, I wanted to talk about that. Like, everyone's telling us no. And the reason we're up here is because, like, maybe 3 people said yes, and it started from there. So just to sort of see the no's as not as a no way out thing, but like use the no's to your advantage. Just use it as a way to kind of find the people who do get your project, who do want to work with you. And it may take time, but just keep going, because it can get really hard, you know? And we tend to only talk about the things we get, but we all know behind the scenes we're getting rejected left and right, you know?
No.
At least I am.
Right, and also know, and also know, like, sometimes you just have to have like an internal thing where you just know. Sometimes you just like get to know you're right, like, and know you're on the right path. I mean, Ava DuVernay submitted her script for Middle of Nowhere to the Sundance Writers and Directors Lab and got rejected. But when she went and made the movie, her movie got into Sundance. You know what I mean? So like, there's kind of an interesting disconnect there. You know what I mean? So you tell me the script isn't good enough. But now that I make the movie, now it's good enough. Not only does it get in, now I win Best Director. So it's like, you know, sometimes people don't know what the hell they're talking about, being frank. You know, and sometimes you have to put yourself in a position to where you surround yourself with a great inner circle of people that you trust, their opinions. And you got to believe more than anybody, because like she said, it's going to be a lot of no's, it's going to be a lot of negativity. But with independent film, the beauty of it is that you can tell yourself yes. You go out there and you can make your story, and, you know, people hopefully will connect with it.
Nice. I want to leave some time for Q&A. But first, I just we did a lot. You dropped some gems for pre-production. Would you add anything else for production, the production phase, in terms of best practices?
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
I think from an actor's perspective, when we're on independent projects, the producer and the director's confidence in the project makes all the difference. If you're not starting off the conversation saying, listen, it's an independent, we don't have money. If you're saying, I want to make this the best film, and oftentimes producers and directors, if they approach you with something that sounds impossible to do, for me, it makes me I have more confidence in them, because I'm like, this dude or this young lady is crazy, but I like their crazy. I like their brand of crazy. They really think that we're gonna make this movie for $2. And the fact that they're ambitious enough to do that, it tells me so much about their love for the project, and it makes you as an actor more invested in it, because you know they're here for the right reasons. And so I would emphasize to any producer, when dealing with talent or dealing with anybody that you want to hire for the project, it really has to come from a heart space, and understand that what you have is enough. So don't approach it saying, well, listen, I don't know if you want to do this, that, and the third. Like, literally say, this is what I have. And if they ask you how much money you have, you say, I have 50 cents. What's the other thing? What else? What else do you need to know? And that boldness, when you walk through towards something boldly, magic happens. And so that is one of the best things I know about working with Matt specifically, is that he is very confident. You know that there's a love for the project, and you're only going to surround yourself with other people who love the project.
That's what's up. Yeah. Production.
I mean, production, there's so many things. I mean, people get hung up on their camera a lot. We need this camera, you know, it's a box. Get somebody with an eye to be behind it. I mean, we shot Neil's movie on the C300. Heidi's we shot on the Alexa. Matt shot his movie on 2 iPhones. And but he had a brilliant DP behind it, Richard Vialet, and confidence in that. And so, you know, you can get hung up on equipment and things. And I mean, it's nice to have an Alexa, no doubt. But it also makes your production a little bit harder. You got to get a big truck and do all these things. I don't know what else. You know, in production, if you're gonna, especially in independent film as a producer, you know, don't walk on the set like you're all that. You know, act like a PA. Hold an apple crate. You know, do that on the first day. Make sure that the actors, you know, I mean, you want people to know that you're there for real. And I'll do anything, you know. I do anything. Get that turkey sandwich, man. I say Dorian. I work with 2 movies on Dorian. There's hardest
Turkey
films can be to make. The only thing he ever asked me for was a turkey sandwich, and and it's amazing.
And some Starbucks.
Yeah, turkey sandwich at Starbucks every day.
But people, the crew does take their lead from you, and I think that's very much true of directors. I think if if things are crazy, but the director looks like they got it, the crew they'll believe it. Matthew Cherry has this thing where I feel like nothing phases him. I know that it probably does, and he's always like, what am I gonna do? But the crew, I always felt that like, there's a confidence there that he's gonna get it done. There's a mindset about it. And in production, it's a big deal. It can be really hard, on Namor, we had our costume designer at one point. I almost lost her. Namor, Heidi had 35 speaking parts. We probably had like 50, 60 extras. Our costume designer costumed everyone. And at one point she was like, you're killing me, man. She was like, and it was just for a second though, because she was like, you want too much out of this. I don't know that I can do it. But I'm like, you already did it, And now that she looks at this film, it's like, look at this extraordinary thing you did by yourself, with one PA. I don't know. I think production, definitely keeping your head up, because there are things that are hard. We had all kinds of disasters on Big Words. And thinking about your crew first is a big deal. I think on our second or third day of Big Words, there was a giant 3-alarm fire at a brownstone down the street. You were there that day, right?
No, I was not there.
You weren't there.
I was there for the fight.
We had to wrap production like halfway through the day.
Wait,
the fight?
The fight? Oh.
Our executive producer yoked somebody up on the street.
Oh yeah, that did happen too. What did he hit somebody with a bottle of Hennessy or something?
Hennessy.
Yo.
I think that happened.
Blackstar, you get the real.
No, we had a producer. He's like about 5'2", and he yoked up like a 6'1" dude and threw him up against the wall.
He tried to take the keys to our location, and Devin wasn't having that. So, every production, there's always going to be difficulties. There's always going to be a location that gets screwed up, and I think keeping your head about it is a big deal.
Yeah, production is all about problem solving, literally.
All
like
of it.
as a filmmaker, all you're doing is solving problems, and if you don't have the right temperament for that, because you do have people that are on set that are just wild as heck, like always cussing people out and just can't handle it, and you have to know how to deal with people. You have to know how to solve problems. You're going to work under pressure. You're going to be like, it's 11th hour. You got 5 pages to get. You can only get one of these scenes. Now you got to figure it out, and you have to be able to keep a clear head under pressure and be able to solve problems. So, you have to expect it. Things are going to go wrong. It's never going to be smooth. And can you handle it or not? And if not, you probably shouldn't be in the business of being a producer.
And to bounce off of that, just to use those limitations as creative possibilities. I couldn't get a market for one of the scenes for a scene I'd written, and it took a lot. Like, we just could not get a market, and we could not afford it, and so I just thought, what do I have? Always go back to what you have, because you have something. Like, there's something there. Like, you just don't see it yet. Just think about how to rework it to make it work with what you have. Like, you have resources, and what did I have? Well, my parents had a medical supply store, so I rewrote the scene for that. Think about those things, and they may not be immediately, you may not know them, immediately, but just stay open during production, and always go back to the script. I think always, there's so many details to think of, to take care of, so many questions to answer. So right before I start the scene, I always just think, why did I write this scene? Go back to that essential question. Let the details go away, because there's a ton of them. But go back to that essential thing, and if you go with that, I think a lot of fear will subside, because you wrote this for a reason. So that helps me. And stay hydrated. That's very important.
Do we have questions in the audience? We have a microphone.
Good morning.
Morning.
I really appreciate all of your insights. The question I wanted to ask is, when you're doing a low-budget production, if each of you could speak on one aspect of the production that you refuse to compromise on, regardless of what the budget is or the resources.
Script. The script, the story.
Non-negotiables.
Boy, you're asking the wrong guy.
I have
I like
one.
to figure stuff out. So, but the script, I mean, and I'm always trying to make sure that the director gets what they want as much as they can. But the script is always the first thing. But usually they write it before I see it. So.
I had one for me in particular. I had a lovely casting director, but when I was casting in LA, like I had written like an Egyptian American script, and God bless him, he brought so many Iranians to this freaking room, and I was like, Farsi is not Arabic. Like, this is not the same. And so it's just like there was an authenticity that I needed, and I would not back down. Like, that is like embarrassing. Like, it just could not happen. And that's Hollywood stuff. They're like, there's a difference? Of course there's a difference, you know? So just, that's like a gut thing, you know?
Anybody else?
I don't know that there's anything I would not, I mean, I'm really, really a dick about my writing, so you could say script, but I remember having an argument about how many times to, what Darian should say nigger. Remember this? Do you remember this argument?
Yeah, I witnessed that more than got involved with it.
Yeah, there was that argument, and it was like,
It was in it.
yeah, it would have been sort of a weird conversation for you to be involved in, but
The perfect white guy answer.
I thought it was one of the most important conversations on the film.
yeah, it was, yeah, and it ended up, I think I ended up bending.
It was you and
Yeah,
Lenny.
me, Lenny, and Darren, yeah, and I think I ended up compromising then. So I don't think there's anything, but in a way, cast maybe.
I think it's cast with you,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, because like
I think if you would have compromised, you wouldn't have directed the film. You would have
Yeah.
let somebody else figure it out.
yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if you're making a movie about three guys in a rap group, someone's gonna say, well, if you make one of them white, you have a bigger audience. And I was like, no, it's not. It's about three black guys. And I had that conversation with black people too. Like that was the thing that I wasn't gonna compromise. I needed not only three black guys, but the three kind of perfect guys. Like I needed the right guys. So I think for me, maybe
The right guys and the actors who get the tone.
Yeah,
You know, there's
yeah,
a tone
yeah.
of film that I like. I know you like. I think we're all kind of in the same realm where
Yeah,
you want it to feel authentic.
yeah.
And I know that you were desperate about that. That was the most important thing. I mean, that's why you wrote the script, I thought.
Yeah.
Because he kept going, he's like, I know all these great actors, and I want to see him in a lead, you
Yeah.
know? And it's like, if you don't see the film you want, you got to make it. You know?
I mean, I remember like once Dorian was cast and I was doing little rewrites and stuff, I could write in his voice because I had heard him say it and like I knew his voice, and then it became so much. It actually became fun to write in the sound of it, knowing what it was going to finally sound like. So I think for me, it's probably more cast than anything. Although I don't like when people touch my words, but I mean, I think it's probably cast.
I mean, I do some not compromising on budget sometimes. I think you might want to hire a crew member that needs a bigger rate, but if you do that, well, maybe then you can't hire a costume designer, or you can't hire, I mean, you really have to make a lot of choices on independent films. And I try to make sure that we're not going to go over budget. I mean, that's really hard to do because you're asking a lot of people. You know, you go to a location and they're like, well, what can you pay us? I'm like, $100, you know. And that's always where I start. But you know, it works sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you do compromise early in production on your budget, you're going to find out on the last few days that you can't pay for catering, you know. And so you got to kind of really hold the line. So I don't like to compromise on that stuff.
What about you, Matthew?
For me, it's strong black women characters. You know, I feel that, I just feel like it's a thing that, I just feel like, my thing is this, like, if you're doing an independent film, you can't be sitting here doing the same stuff that these studio films are doing. You know what I mean? You can't cast them in manners where it's like, the sassy best friend. It's like, what are we doing? Why are we doing the indie? With the indie, if you can literally do whatever you want, and if you're a filmmaker that's perpetuating the same stereotypes, like, what's the point? Like, you know what I mean? You might as well just wait 5-10 years and get it made at the studio level. And so for me, it's trying to circumvent things that you see like on a major level and trying to do things that kind of show it from a different side. So the one thing I find the most kind of offensive time to times is the way, black women are portrayed, in film. And so always trying to, and it's not always having to be peachy keen, but just showing them complex. If you show a negative, show a positive too. Just simple shit.
Yeah. We have another question? Yes.
My question is about distribution, and I was wondering, Matthew, all of you, any of you could speak to this, but in particular, Matthew, I wanted to ask you, what are your views of kind of a straight to Netflix trajectory, or do you recommend trying to, I don't know much, so.
I think for independent films these days, your theatrical release, if you get one, is often a loss leader that's promoting your other ways of distribution. I think even if you look at studio films, a lot of them, they spend so much marketing money on the theatrical, and they might not make money on the theatrical, but they know that if they raise the value of theatrical, then you're going to get more for the ancillary revenue. I mean, independent films, just going to Netflix it's great, and Netflix is incredible. It's hard to get distribution for African American films overseas. Big Words is through Array is in 10 or 12 territories all over the world. And it's a great thing. And I think Netflix also doesn't seem to have the structural kind of things that make foreign sales really difficult for African American films. They have the ability to ignore those things. And I think that kind of future is really exciting. But at the same time, getting a theatrical release can be important. You're not going to get that review in the New York Times unless you actually play in New York, And maybe that's important to you because you want to get a good review. But it can also, people know about your film more. It puts you in the canon. And so it's hard to say. Every film kind of has to find its way. Distribution is very difficult. It's very difficult for films of people of color because the options are limited. There's a lot of companies that never release a film, that star people of color. And so, there's only a few places that's what they actually want to do. And so it makes your options more limited, which is difficult. But there's ways to get through it, Matthew ended up getting, you had a small theatrical on last fall, but they played on BET. They got a lot of people to see that film. It's on Netflix now, everywhere. We did a good theatrical with Array on Big Words. We played, 25 cities, played overseas, and it's on Netflix, it's all over, so. But distribution is still the tough nut to crack, People have been able to find ways to make films. But finding, the distribution game is still very difficult, and we're still working our way through it,
We good on time? We're done with time?
You have the last comments to wrap it up, Dr. Blake.
This was great. No, seriously, thank you. Like I began with, I think it's always good for us to walk out of these conversations knowing something more and being inspired to do something more. So I got a lot of insight. Y'all got some insight? Thank y'all very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, and don't forget to check out Namor tomorrow.
Namor at 2:40, 2:50, 9 rides at 7 o'clock.
Closing out our festival. Thank y'all.
And Big Words on Netflix.
Okay, so this was